It's strange how betrayal doesn't arrive with thunder or warning. Sometimes, it comes with the sound of suitcase wheels rolling across your living room floor, and a smile so warm, you mistake it for love. When Daniel told me his sister was coming to stay with us for just a few weeks, I didn't hesitate. Of course, I said, she's family. That word family carried so much weight in our marriage. It was Daniel's favorite word, one he used to explain every favor, every unplanned visit, every boundary I tried to draw. I'd married him 5 years earlier, a gentle man with a quiet heart and a stubborn loyalty to his blood, and for the most part, I didn't mind. His people were kind enough. Sunday dinners, birthdays, the usual polite gatherings. I'd learned to navigate them all with a smile and a casserole. But Claire was different. She was the baby of the family, spoiled, charismatic, and utterly unpredictable. The kind of woman who could charm a stranger in 5 minutes and borrow money from them in 10. Daniel adored her, always had. So when he called me from work one Tuesday afternoon and said, Claire needs a place to stay, just until she gets back on her feet, I didn't argue. I just asked, how long exactly is just until? He laughed, a soft, nervous laugh. Couple of weeks, maybe 3. She's been through a rough patch. I want to help her. I wanted to ask what kind of rough patch he meant, but the way his voice softened made me stop. He needed this to feel like a good brother. So, I said yes. The day Claire arrived, the air felt heavy, like the calm before rain. She stepped out of a silver rideshare dragging 2 large suitcases behind her, dressed in a cream blazer and oversized sunglasses that screamed expensive trouble. Emily, she said, throwing her arms around me like we were old friends, you look amazing. Her perfume hit me before her words did, something floral and sharp, the kind that lingers even after the door closes. Daniel came out, smiling like a man who'd just brought home a miracle. He hugged her tight. It's good to see you, kiddo. Kiddo, he hadn't called her that in years. I helped carry her bags inside, pretending not to notice the 3rd suitcase, the one Daniel didn't mention. For the first few days, everything seemed fine. Claire slept late, wandered around in Daniel's old t-shirts, and spent her evenings scrolling through her phone with a glass of wine. She cooked dinner once, pasta that somehow used half our olive oil, and kept promising she'd find a job soon. Daniel beamed at her every time she said it. Take your time, he'd say, no rush. But there were moments that unsettled me. Small things, the way she'd glance at my laptop when I was paying bills, the way her eyes flickered toward the envelope drawer near the kitchen counter where I kept our checkbook. And how she'd casually ask, so how much do you and Danny save every month? You two must be doing pretty well. I laughed it off. We manage, I said. She smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was the kind that measures you, like she was calculating something. One night, about a week after she moved in, I found her sitting at the dining table long after midnight. The house was quiet, only the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the kitchen clock filled the space. Her face was lit by her phone screen. She didn't notice me at first. Couldn't sleep, I asked softly. She startled, then smiled too quickly. Oh, hey, just checking emails. Her laptop was open, a few papers scattered around, bills, receipts, a piece of mail with our bank logo on it. My heart gave a small jolt. That's ours, I said gently, reaching for the envelope. Oh, yeah, sorry, she said, laughing it off. It was mixed in with the junk mail. Thought it was mine. I nodded, trying to believe her. But that night, I locked my laptop and changed my banking password. It felt silly, paranoid even, but something inside me whispered, don't ignore this one. 2 days later, Daniel came home with a box of pastries and a grin. Claire got an interview. Claire beamed. Yep, a finance firm downtown. Can you believe it? I smiled, genuinely relieved. That's great. When's the interview? Tomorrow morning, she said, and Danny's lending me his car. The next day, she left early, heels clicking on the tile, perfume trailing in her wake. I made coffee, tidied the kitchen, and exhaled for what felt like the first time in days. By noon, she texted Daniel, interview went amazing, celebrating with a friend. She didn't come home that night. When she returned the next morning, she looked tired but radiant, like someone who'd just won something. Daniel didn't question it. He made her breakfast, told her how proud he was, and I wanted to believe it too. I wanted to believe maybe I was wrong about her, that maybe, under all that charm and chaos, she was just trying to start over. But that hope started to fade when I checked our mail later that week and saw a bank statement showing a withdrawal I didn't recognize. $1,200.transfer.online. My hands trembled as I read it. Daniel never handled the online banking. That was always me. I checked again, thinking maybe I'd made a mistake, but there it was. One transfer, then another. Small amounts at first. $300, $250, $500, then one large one, $7,000. The date matched the day Claire celebrated with a friend. I remember standing there, frozen, the kitchen clock ticking too loudly. The house felt suddenly unfamiliar, like someone had rearranged it while I wasn't looking. Daniel walked in a moment later, whistling softly. I turned to him, voice shaking. "Daniel, have you checked our account lately?" He looked up, confused. "No, why?" I handed him the paper. His smile faded. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. Then he whispered, "No, she wouldn't." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But somewhere deep down, I already knew she would. Daniel sat at the table, staring at the printed bank statement as if it were written in another language. His fingers tapped against the wood, a nervous rhythm that filled the silence between us. "Maybe it's a glitch," he said finally, voice low. "Banks make mistakes, all the time." I wanted to believe that. God, I did. But I'd already called the bank. There were no mistakes. The transfers had been made using Daniel's login, but from an unfamiliar device. "Daniel," I said softly, "when was the last time you logged into the account from your phone?" He frowned. I don't even remember the password." Exactly that. My stomach twisted. I knew then that whoever accessed that account had to be in this house. That night, I barely slept. Every sound felt amplified. The creak of the hallway floor, the hum of the refrigerator, the whisper of wind against the window. At around 2 a.m., I heard footsteps, light ones, moving from the guest room toward the kitchen. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Daniel, and followed the sound. There she was, Claire, standing in the faint blue glow of the open fridge, eating yogurt straight from the container. She looked up, startled, then smiled like I'd just caught her sneaking cookies. "Couldn't sleep," she said casually. "Jet lag, I guess." "From where?" I asked before I could stop myself. Her smile flickered, just for a second. "You know, from before I came here." "Still adjusting." I nodded, pretending not to notice the phone glowing in her other hand. Screen tilted away from me. The next morning, I found Daniel in the garage, pacing with his phone pressed to his ear. "She says she didn't do it," he said as soon as he saw me. "She swears she doesn't even know our account info." I crossed my arms. "Of course she says that. What did you expect?" He sighed, rubbing his temples. "Emily, she's my sister. I can't just accuse her without proof." Proof. That word cut deeper than I expected. I'd been the one keeping receipts, tracking bills, organizing everything, and now I needed proof to convince my husband that his sister wasn't some lost little angel. "Fine," I said quietly. "Then, let's get proof." That day, while Daniel was at work and Claire was meeting a recruiter, I sat at my desk and started digging. Emails, notifications, login alerts, and there it was. A new device registered to our online account, time-stamped just 2 days after Claire moved in. I clicked details. The name of the device read, Claire's iPhone. I stared at the screen, pulse racing, my hands trembled. Not from anger, but from the cold realization that every uneasy thought I'd had was right. I printed everything, the transfers, the device logs, the times. Then I tucked them into a manila folder and slid it under my side of the bed. When Daniel came home that night, I didn't say a word. I just watched him and Claire cook dinner together. Her laughing, him smiling, completely unaware of the quiet storm brewing behind my eyes. Later that evening, I overheard them in the living room. Claire was saying, "I might need to borrow a little cash, just to cover my phone bill until my first paycheck." Daniel replied instantly, "Of course, whatever you need." That was it. The sound of his easy generosity, blind, habitual, made something in me snap. I stepped out from the hallway, holding the folder. "Actually," I said, "you've already given her plenty." They both looked up, startled. I placed the folder on the coffee table. "That's everything. Bank records, device logs, transfers, all from our joint account, all made from Claire's phone." Daniel blinked, confused. "What are you talking about?" Claire's face went pale, but she recovered fast. "That's ridiculous. I don't even know your password." "Really?" I said, pulling out another paper. "Then how did your device get registered to our online banking app 2 days after you moved in?" Her mouth opened, then closed again. Daniel turned to her, eyes wide. "Claire." "Danny, it's not what you think," she said quickly, standing up. I was trying to check my account. Maybe I logged in wrong or something. $7,000 wrong. I shot back. You expect us to believe that? Her voice sharpened. You've always hated me, Emily. You've been waiting for a reason to turn him against me. Don't do that, I said quietly. Don't turn this into me versus you. This is about trust. But she didn't listen. She turned to Daniel, eyes wide with tears. She's lying. You know she is. Daniel just stared between us, torn, silent. That night, the house was colder than usual. Claire locked herself in the guest room. Daniel barely spoke. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how love could make someone so blind. By morning, the guest room door was open, the bed neatly made, the closet empty. Her suitcases were gone. No note, no text, no goodbye. Daniel found her number disconnected, and when I logged into the bank, our savings account was empty. Every last dollar. Daniel sat on the edge of the bed, his face pale and hollow. She wouldn't just take everything, he whispered. I wanted to comfort him, to say something kind, but the truth sat heavy on my tongue. She already did. I called the bank. Again, reported the theft, froze our accounts, changed every password. The fraud investigator promised to trace the transactions, but deep down, I knew it was too late. Money can be replaced. Trust can't. That evening, as the sun set behind the blinds, Daniel turned to me with glassy eyes. I just wanted to help her, he said. I nodded. I know. But sometimes, helping someone who doesn't want to change only feeds their hunger. He didn't respond. He just stared at the empty doorway, the one Claire had walked through without looking back. That was the day something inside me shifted. I realized that forgiveness without boundaries isn't kindness. It's surrender. And I promised myself I'd never surrender again. The following morning, I stood by the front window, watching the police cruiser pull away. They'd taken our statements, copied the evidence, and promised to look into it. Their voices were polite but distant, the kind of tone that said they'd seen this story too many times before. When I closed the door, Daniel was still sitting on the couch, shoulders hunched, head in his hands. The man who'd once laughed over burnt toast and Sunday crossword puzzles now looked like a stranger drowning in silence. She's my sister, he whispered, voice raw. My only sister. How could she? He stopped, his breath catching mid-sentence. As if the words themselves were too heavy to carry. I wanted to touch him, to say something that could soften the ache, but I couldn't find the right words. So I just stood there, arms crossed, watching the man who'd once been my safe place unravel before my eyes. Days turned into a blur, between phone calls to the bank, follow-ups with the police, and endless conversations with fraud investigators. The house began to feel colder, emptier. The guest room remained untouched, her perfume lingering faintly in the air like a ghost that refused to leave. Every time I walked past it, I felt the same twist in my chest. Anger, yes, but also sadness, because no matter what she'd done, Claire was part of Daniel, and hurting him had become her final act of cruelty. One evening, I came home from work and found Daniel at the kitchen table, a half-empty bottle of wine beside him. The folder I'd used as evidence, the one with the bank statements and login records, lay open in front of him. He looked up as I walked in. Do you ever wonder, he said slowly, if we pushed her too hard? I froze. Excuse me. Maybe she felt cornered, humiliated. I should have been more patient. I took a breath, trying to steady the storm rising inside me. Daniel, she stole from us. She lied to our faces. You can't justify that, he sighed, rubbing his forehead. I'm not justifying. I'm trying to understand. I shook my head. Sometimes there's nothing to understand. Some people don't want saving, Daniel. They just want taking. The words hung between us, sharp, cold, final. For a few weeks, we moved through life like ghosts. We went to work, came home, cooked in silence. The sound of forks against plates replaced conversation. And every night, I'd lie awake beside him, wondering if we'd ever be the same again. One night, I found him on the back porch, staring into the dark yard. He didn't turn when I opened the door. I called her again today, he said quietly, the number's still disconnected. My throat tightened. You have to stop doing that, he nodded, but his eyes were far away. She's my sister, Emily. I can't just erase her. I'm not asking you to erase her, I said softly. I'm asking you to stop letting her erase us. The next week, a detective called. They'd traced part of the stolen funds to a prepaid card, registered in Claire's name, purchased 3 towns over. It wasn't enough for an arrest, but it confirmed what I already knew. When I told Daniel, he went quiet. Then he whispered, "So she really did it?" I nodded, yes. He sat down slowly, staring at nothing. "Then, I guess I've been grieving the wrong person." "What do you mean?" He looked up at me, eyes hollow. "I thought I lost my sister. But maybe, I lost the version of her I invented, to feel better about who she really was." I didn't say anything. There was nothing left to say. A month later, the police called again. They'd closed the case. Claire had vanished. No address, no digital trail, no sign she'd ever existed in our system. It was as if she'd swallowed our savings and dissolved into thin air. That night, Daniel poured himself another glass of wine and asked if forgiveness was possible. "Not for her," he said, "for me." I placed my hand over his. "Forgiveness isn't about letting her off the hook, Daniel. It's about not letting her drag us down with her." He looked at me then, really looked like he hadn't in weeks, and for the first time, I saw the faint spark of the man I married flicker behind his tired eyes. The healing wasn't instant. It never is. We went to counseling, that we rebuilt our finances, one budget at a time. We learned to talk again, slowly, carefully, as if our words might break the fragile peace between us. And yet, even in that quiet rebuilding, her shadow lingered, not as a ghost of regret, but as a reminder of what we allowed, what we ignored, and how love without limits can become a form of self-betrayal. One Sunday, months later, Daniel found an envelope in the mail. No return address, just his name, written in looping cursive. He opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a single $100 bill, and a short note. "I'm sorry. I needed it more than you did. Tell Emily, I hope she never stops guarding her heart." There was no signature, but we didn't need one. Daniel set the note on the table and exhaled. "That's her, isn't it?" I nodded slowly. "It's her." He looked down at the bill, then folded it carefully and placed it back in the envelope. "She's still trying to make peace in the only way she knows how," he murmured. "And that's the tragedy," I said. "She still thinks money can buy it." That night, I sat alone on the porch, listening to the wind rustle through the trees. For the first time, I didn't feel angry, just still, because some wounds don't close by punishing someone else. They heal by protecting yourself better next time, and that's exactly what I intended to do. A few weeks later, the news traveled, not through the police, but through whispers. Daniel's aunt called first, then his cousin, then his mother. Each conversation started the same way, soft pity in their voices, followed by carefully chosen words that sounded like concern but carried the sting of gossip. "I heard about Claire," his aunt murmured over the phone. "She's been seen in Tulsa, or maybe Atlanta. You know how she is, always chasing something that's never enough." Daniel just said, "Thank you for letting me know," and hung up. He didn't tell me right away. I found out when I heard him talking quietly in the garage, his voice tired, like every sentence was an apology he hadn't yet said out loud. The family wanted answers, not from Claire, but from us. They asked why we'd involved the police, why we hadn't handled it privately. One of them even said, "She's family. You don't turn family in." That night, Daniel sat at the dinner table, staring at his untouched food. "They don't understand," he said softly. "They think blood should forgive everything." I set down my fork. "Blood doesn't excuse betrayal. It just makes it hurt more." He nodded, eyes glistening. "You're right. But part of me still feels like I failed her, like maybe I should have done something different." "Maybe," I said gently, "but loving someone doesn't mean saving them from the consequences of their choices." He didn't answer, just reached across the table and took my hand for the first time in weeks. And in that small, wordless gesture, I felt something shift. Not forgiveness, not yet, but maybe the faint beginning of understanding. A month later, we were invited to a family gathering at Daniel's mother's house. I hesitated at first. The last thing I wanted was another round of half-truths and silent judgment. But Daniel said, "We can't avoid them forever." So I agreed. The moment we arrived, I could feel the tension in the air. The way conversations stopped when we walked in, the way eyes darted away, pretending to be busy with food and small talk. Daniel's mother greeted us with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You two look tired," she said. "I suppose all that drama with Claire took a toll." I forced a smile. "We're managing." She hesitated, then leaned in slightly. "You know, dear, Claire always spoke fondly of you. Said you had a good heart. Maybe she just lost her way." I wanted to say something sharp to ask if losing your way included draining someone's savings and vanishing into thin air, but but instead, I just nodded. There was no point. Some people need to hold on to their illusions like oxygen. As the evening went on, the tension thickened. A few glasses of wine loosened tongues, and soon someone mentioned the money. How much it was, what we'd done, what we should have done. I felt the heat rise in my chest. Finally, I stood up. My voice was calm, but it carried enough steel to silence the room. You all think this is about money? I said. It's not. It's about trust. It's about letting someone into your home, your life, and watching them burn it from the inside out. And the worst part isn't losing the money. It's losing the person you thought they were. Silence fell like a curtain. Daniel's mother opened her mouth, then closed it again. Someone murmured, "She's right." And in that quiet, something remarkable happened. Daniel reached over and put his arm around me. Not protectively, not performative lie. Just solidly, like a man finally choosing which side of truth he wanted to stand on. That night, when we got home, I found him sitting in the living room, staring at a photo of him and Claire as children, two sunburned kids on a beach, holding melted ice cream cones, laughing at nothing. He ran a thumb over her face. "She was always wild," he said softly. "I used to think she'd grow out of it. Guess I didn't want to see that she grew into it instead." I sat beside him. "You loved her the way a brother should. That's not weakness." He smiled sadly. "And you never stopped trying to believe in her, even when I did." I shrugged. "Maybe that's my weakness." He turned to me then, eyes warm but tired. "No, that's your strength. You love without a net. That's what saved us, Em. Not her apology, not the cops. For the first time in months, I let myself breathe, really breathe, because maybe, just maybe, the worst had already happened and we were still standing. A few days later, we received a letter from the bank, an official closure notice on the fraud investigation. Attached was a note from the fraud department. Partial recovery, $4,873, transferred to your account. It wasn't even 10% of what she took, but when I saw that small deposit, something inside me settled. It wasn't about the number, it was about closure. Daniel and I sat together that night, scrolling through new financial plans. We laughed for the first time in months. Not the loud, careless kind, but the soft, healing laughter that sounds like air returning to lungs after too long underwater. In the weeks that followed, Daniel started volunteering with a community outreach group that helped recovering addicts and people with financial troubles. He said he needed to make peace with what he couldn't fix. I started journaling again, writing little reflections at the kitchen table, late at night, while the world slept. Some of those reflections would later turn into stories. Stories about love, loss, betrayal, and the quiet ways we learn to start again. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Family doesn't always mean safe, and forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. Sometimes, it just means letting go, before the weight of someone else's choices drowns you too. That night, I closed my journal and whispered a quiet prayer, not for Claire to come back, but for Daniel to finally stop waiting for her too, and maybe, in some small way, for myself to never mistake tolerance for love again. 6 months passed. Seasons shifted quietly. Like the slow turning of a clock, I no longer tried to control. Our home, once filled with tension and silence, began to breathe again. There were still scars, invisible ones, stitched into the air between us, but they didn't ache as much anymore. Every morning, I brewed coffee while Daniel read the news. Sometimes we talked, sometimes we didn't. The silence felt different now, not brittle, but calm, like two people who had seen the worst of each other's pain and decided to keep standing anyway. One Saturday, I walked past the old guest room, the one Claire had stayed in. For months, I'd kept the door closed. I couldn't bring myself to open it. Every time I tried, I saw her smile, her suitcases, her perfume lingering in the hallway. But that morning, I opened the door. Dust floated in the sunlight, quiet and The room looked smaller than I remembered. I stood there for a long while, then began to clear it out, slowly, carefully, one drawer at a time. I found a few things she'd left behind, a half-empty lipstick, an old phone charger, a faded photo of her and Daniel when they were kids. I almost threw it away, but something stopped me. I took the photo, placed it in a small frame, and set it on the living room shelf. Not as forgiveness, not as remembrance, but as acknowledgement, a piece of what once was, and what would never be again. Daniel noticed it that evening. He stood there, hands in his pockets, staring at the photo for a long time. "Why did you put that out?" he asked quietly. I smiled faintly. Because pretending she never existed doesn't erase what happened. It just keeps the wound open. He nodded, the corner of his mouth trembling. You're stronger than I am. I reached for his hand. No, just tired of fighting ghosts. He exhaled slowly, and for the first time, I saw a trace of peace in his eyes. In the months that followed, we rebuilt, not our savings, not yet, but our rhythm. Daniel picked up more work. I started freelancing as a writer. Funny thing, the story that came from all this pain found a quiet, little audience online. People wrote to me. Strangers, women who'd trusted to us, men who'd been blindsided by family, daughters who'd lost parents to greed. They said, your story feels like mine. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel alone. One evening, I got a message from a private investigator handling multiple fraud cases. He asked if I wanted to be notified if they ever found Claire. I stared at the email for a while before replying, no, thank you. I've already found what I needed. And I meant it. Because what I needed wasn't an arrest or an apology. It was freedom. Freedom from the loop of why and how. Months later, something unexpected happened. Daniel received a handwritten letter, no return address, but the handwriting was unmistakable. It was from Claire. He read it silently, then handed it to me. His hands shook slightly. I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I can't return what I took, but I wanted you to know. I didn't run because of the money. I ran because of shame. You both gave me more than I deserved, and I ruined it. I don't expect forgiveness. Just thank you for trying to love me anyway. I folded the letter slowly. There was no apology that could fix what she did, but somehow, her words didn't make me angry. They just made me sad. She's alive, I said softly. Daniel nodded, tears glistening, and still lost. We didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. That night, I wrote in my journal again, not about loss this time, but about learning. I wrote, some betrayals don't destroy us. They refine us. They teach us where our boundaries end and where our strength begins. And sometimes, the people who hurt us most are the ones who force us to discover what forgiveness really means, not for them, but for ourselves. A year later, the guest room became my office. I filled it with light, books, and soft music. On the wall hung a small framed quote that said, you can't save someone who chooses to drown. I looked at it every morning as I worked, a quiet reminder that love has limits, and that setting boundaries isn't cruelty, it's self-respect. Daniel and I never became the same couple we once were. We became something quieter, deeper. There were days when trust came hard, but there were also nights when he'd reach for my hand under the table, a simple gesture that said, we're still here, and maybe that was enough. A year to the day after Claire left, I baked a cake, not to celebrate but to mark survival. We invited a few close friends, laughed over old stories, and as the evening sunlight spilled through the curtains, I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. The past hadn't vanished. It had simply stopped holding me hostage. Before bed, I stood by the window, looking at the quiet street below. Somewhere out there, Claire was living another life. Maybe she was struggling. Maybe she was fine. Either way, I whispered a silent wish into the dark. I hope you've stopped running, Claire. I really do. Then, I turned off the light, walked to bed, and finally, slept without dreams.